Hi there, in this video I'm going to be adding the details to this painting of a lily, and on the right you can see the reference photo from my garden that I took a few years ago, and on the left I've already done the grisaille and the first pass of color and in the correct values. Here's my palette. I'll list all the colors below. So I've got a warm and cool version of each color of yellow, red, blue, and then I've got burnt umber and titanium white. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that my painting is completely dry. It's been drying for about 3 to 4 days, and I'm just using a white makeup sponge, one of those wedges, to apply a very, very thin layer of walnut alkyd medium. It's the M-gram walnut alkyd medium that I've been using lately that is really nice. I really like it. And what this does is gives me a nice layer to paint into, and you can see that there's no color on the sponge, so that just, to make sure, do a small area, make sure that no color is coming up. So what I'm doing now is I'm just going back in with pure titanium white to just put in some of the highlights of those tiny little things that grow on the surface of lilies. I'm not sure what the technical name is for that. I'm using titanium white just straight from the tube because there's no pure white on the second layer of color that I did, so this assures that the white will stand out. And then I'll soften it and go back in with some grays that I mix that are slightly darker values of, cool shadows and warm shadows to bring those out. So I'm just kind of touching those in right now with a very small brush. I'm using a Robert Simmons white sable, and it's I believe it's size 1. These are really nice brushes for working on panels because they're soft and just really nice synthetic white sable brushes. So I'm still heightening some of the areas that are getting full sun. I want to go back in later, and some of those areas where it looks darker, I'm gonna put some more colors in there that will make the translucency of the flower kind of come through as much as possible. So now I've taken some blue, some ultramarine, and I've toned it down a little bit with some orange, and I'm putting that into some of the shadow areas that I thought were a little too warm. I wanted to, since they're in shadow, some of these parts are actually picking up the sky color. That's why when you see surfaces of leaves that are facing the sky or not reflecting other colors around it, on a sunny day they'll usually reflect some of the sky blue. So that adds a whole nice level of realism to your work. And I'm softening it out as I go, and I'm using my a little bit of a larger brush without any paint on it, just to soften it out. And that's just like a Grumbacher Bristlette bright number 2. It's That's a nice brush too, a synthetic brush. It's fairly soft and good for softening out small little areas of color. So I'm constantly referring to my photo reference. I don't want to copy the photo exactly. I don't have exactly the same colors going on. I'm not trying to exactly replicate the photo. The most important thing is having your values correct, and that will go a long way towards making your work look realistic. But I'm not trying to replicate the colors exactly, but I really do want to get the shadows, the warmth and the coolness of the shadow colors, because that adds so much to the transparency, the illusion of transparency of flower petals, which is really a challenge to capture. If you're looking at your flower, really look at it and compare colors side by side to see which colors are warm, which are cool. In this instance, take that petal at the top left. You can see that the petal, kind of folds into almost a V shape. So on the left side, the petal is kind of turning upwards and it's kind of reflecting the sky, whereas that top part of the petal, which is kind of the right side of the petal, but it's on the top, is kind of folding inwards and it's not reflecting the sky. There's light coming through it, so that's why that color, that shadow there is warmer, because it's not reflecting the sky, whereas the other side of the petal is. So look for those tiny little nuances in your colors and really try to develop your eye to be able to pick those up, and even kind of in some cases exaggerate them. A lot of times if you have a photo, it doesn't really quite show everything the way it is in nature exactly anyway. I mean, you're going to lose nuances in shadows. So that's where it's helpful to paint from life, for one thing, because you're able to see colors in those shadows that you can't really see in photographs. And then doing that will help you develop the ability to, when you're working from photos, to be able to look at your painting and say, well, I don't really see that in this photo, but I know that this is what happens in nature. Colors, parts of things that reflect sky. That's a really valuable thing to know, because the point of painting is not really to replicate a photo, but to add that kind of magic to your subject. So really try to develop the ability to observe differences, relationships between colors, warmth. Make it a point. I do this and just go outside and look around and compare colors to each other. Probably I spend most of my time just asking myself, is that warmer or is that cooler? And when you're mixing colors on your palette, what you're seeing on your palette can be very deceptive when you go and take your color and put it onto your painting, because on your palette it's not relating to all the other colors. But ultimately, when you put the color on your painting, you want to just dab on a small area until you make sure that the color really is harmonizing with the rest of your colors and it's not too blue or too warm. This is really what causes a painting to look muddy. Muddy colors are basically colors that are not the correct color temperature. So this is where you'll want to think about which colors to add that will make your color the correct temperature. You may need to add yellow, but which yellow do you add? Do you add cadmium yellow medium or cadmium lemon? So it comes from experience. It's good to play around with adding colors. You may notice that adding cadmium yellow medium to a color makes the color greener than you'd like, and then you'd have to add maybe some alizarin crimson. I'd love to do some videos on color theory in the future. If you want to see that, just leave me a comment below and let me know if that's a topic that would interest you. That's a whole subject that we could really talk about for many, many hours. Now I've started to work on the stem, or not the stem, that's the pistil, I believe. Really have to get my botanical terms down. So when I'm mixing greens, I don't have a green on my palette. I'm actually using blue and yellow to make the greens. So I'm working between Ultramarine Blue and Phthalo Blue and Cadmium Lemon and Cadmium Yellow Medium. And I'm using red and also more of an orangey red to add to the greens to tone them down in some of the areas. And also white, titanium white added to green will really cool it off. So a lot of times I'll have to add some more yellow into it. So by now I have lots of colors on my palette that I can use to go back into different areas and tie things together, maybe lighten up some areas, darken up some areas, or just soften. I'm going back in with my larger brush and softening out areas that need to be adjusted, and just generally going around and making sure that my values are correct and my color temperatures are correct, and trying to add a little bit of sparkle into things. I'm also going back into the background with some bluish greens and some more yellowy greens to kind of try to give that sunlight effect on the background, but still keeping it quite blurry because I don't want to detract so much from the flower. And wrapping it up. I have a little bit more work to do, but that's about it. So that's as far as I went with recording that process. I did spend about another hour and a half or so finishing up this painting, and this is the final result right here. And you can see that I've gone into the background and done some kind of blurry, deep greens, warm greens and cool greens. And I've also just gone around and kind of softened things and added shadows and generally softened things up until I was happy with it. As I said, I wasn't really concerned with replicating this photo. I really just wanted to try to get a realistic impression of it. So hopefully you found this video helpful, and I hope that if you did enjoy it, you'll subscribe to my channel and so that I can continue making videos in the future. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video.